The morning sun was just rising, casting a golden light over the busy city streets. People were rushing to work, cars honking, and the chatter of the market filling the air. Amid the crowd, a young woman walked quietly, her clothes worn and faded. Her shoes were scuffed, and her hands were calloused, showing the signs of a life spent struggling. She carried a small bag, worn at the edges, which held only a few essentials. She moved carefully through the crowd, her eyes scanning for something, anything that might help her get through the day. She paused in front of a street corner where an old piano sat. It looked neglected, with a few keys chipped and the wood scratched from years of use. But to her, it was more than just an old instrument. It was an opportunity. She glanced around at the people walking by. Some were too busy to notice her, others looked down at their phones, and a few gave her a quick, dismissive glance. She felt a small knot in her stomach. Hunger gnawed at her, and her stomach growled quietly. She had spent the night without much to eat, and the day ahead promised no easy solution. Taking a deep breath, she approached the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, hesitating. She had not played in public for a long time, and the thought of being laughed at made her heart beat faster. But the pang of hunger reminded her that she had little choice. She looked around again, then spoke in a small voice, almost to herself, but loud enough for a few nearby people to hear. "May I play for a piece of food?" A few people stopped and looked at her. Some laughed quietly, others shook their heads. One man muttered something under his breath and walked away. The laughter stung a little, but she tried not to let it show. She simply nodded, took a deep breath, and sat down at the piano. Her fingers touched the keys lightly at first, testing the sound, feeling the texture of the worn ivory beneath her fingertips. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting herself remember the music she had once played so freely when no one was watching. The first note she played was soft, almost tentative. It was clear, pure, and it seemed to hang in the air for a moment before blending into the quiet hum of the morning. City. People who were walking by began to slow down. Their laughter faded as they turned their heads toward the music. A few stopped entirely, standing at a distance, unsure if they should listen. There was something different about the way she played. Her hands moved with care, each note deliberate, carrying emotion that words could not express. As she continued, her confidence grew. The melody became richer, flowing naturally from her hands, telling a story of hardship, hope, and resilience. The worn keys no longer seemed like a limitation. Instead, they became a voice, a way for her to share her story without saying a single word. The crowd began to gather, some curious, some skeptical, but all drawn in by the music that seemed to rise above the noise of the street. A few children wandered closer, eyes wide, mesmerized by the sound. A woman with a shopping bag stopped and tilted her head, listening intently. Even the street vendors paused, fingers frozen mid-task, as if the music had momentarily stopped time. The young woman at the piano did not notice them individually. She was lost in the music, her own struggles and memories flowing through each note. The music spoke of nights spent hungry, of the cold that had pressed against her back, and of the dreams she still held onto despite everything. The laughter that had greeted her request for food was now replaced with whispers of surprise and admiration. People exchanged glances, nodding to one another, unable to look away. Her fingers danced across the keys with a fluidity that belied the roughness of her life. There was a rhythm in her playing that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the city itself, a mixture of chaos and beauty. Her eyes, still closed, reflected a calm focus, a determination that came from years of practicing in silence, away from judgmental eyes. As the morning wore on, more people gathered. Some pulled out their phones to record the moment, while others simply stood, letting the music wash over them. A few tried to offer her money or a snack, but she shook her head gently, her eyes never leaving the keys. The music was her way of asking for help, of showing the world who she was without needing to explain it. Each note carried her story, and slowly, the crowd began to understand the depth of her talent. Passersby who had initially ignored her now whispered to each other, impressed by the skill and emotion that seemed impossible for someone playing on a street corner. A man leaned against a lamppost, nodding along to the rhythm, while an elderly woman smiled, tears forming in her eyes. The young woman at the piano remained humble, her movements precise but not showy, letting the music speak for itself. Minutes turned into an hour, and still she played, barely noticing the hunger gnawing at her stomach. The food she had hoped for was slowly starting to appear, offered by those who were moved by her performance. A small sandwich was placed on the piano bench beside her, and a bottle of water followed. She nodded her thanks silently, her focus never breaking. She knew that the music was more important than anything else, that it was her way to survive and to be seen. The city around her continued its rush, but for those who stopped to listen, time seemed to slow. People who had been too busy to notice the world around them were now captivated, momentarily transported by the beauty emerging from the old, chipped piano. Some shook their heads in disbelief, murmuring about the unexpected talent they were witnessing. Others smiled, realizing that even in the chaos of life, moments of pure beauty could appear anywhere, even on a dusty street corner. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the young woman's playing reached a quiet, gentle conclusion. Her last note lingered in the air, and for a brief moment, the city felt still. The crowd, now larger and more attentive than when she had begun, offered a soft, almost reverent applause. It was not loud or boastful, but heartfelt, a recognition of the extraordinary talent that had emerged from such humble circumstances. She stood slowly, her hands still tingling from the effort, and gave a small, humble bow. People continued to watch her, some offering words of encouragement, others simply nodding in admiration. She smiled faintly, grateful not only for the food and support, but for the acknowledgement of her abilities. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not just as a hungry stranger, but as someone with a gift that could touch hearts. The morning passed into afternoon, and she packed up her small belongings, leaving the piano corner with a mixture of exhaustion and hope. She knew that the day was far from over, that life would continue to challenge her, but she also knew that she had shared something meaningful. Her music had spoken louder than her words ever could, and she carried that quiet triumph with her as she disappeared into the busy streets, ready to face whatever came next. The crowd had barely dispersed when the young woman found another quiet corner to rest. Her small meal from the morning felt like a miracle, and she nibbled slowly, savoring every bite. Hunger had a way of sharpening every sense, and even this small relief made her feel almost light for the first time in days. She thought about the people who had stopped to listen to her music, their faces a mixture of surprise and admiration. For a moment, she let herself imagine what life could be like if she could play not just for scraps of food, but for an audience that truly appreciated her talent. As she finished eating, her mind drifted to the piano she had played that morning. It wasn't just the music itself, but the way it had affected people. She had seen a change in their expressions, the way the laughter turned to silence, and the looks of awe that replaced judgment. It made her wonder how many people went through life without ever really listening to the beauty around them. Her own life had been a quiet struggle, full of challenges and lonely nights, but in that brief moment, she felt connected to others in a way she had never felt before. She walked slowly down the street, letting the sounds of the city surround her. The clatter of vendors, the hum of traffic, and the chatter of people created a rhythm that she couldn't ignore. Her fingers itched for a piano, a place to let the music flow and speak for her. She passed several shops and cafes, all bustling with activity, and wondered if she could find another piano, even an old and neglected one, to play. Every time she imagined touching the keys, she felt a thrill run through her. After wandering for a while, she came upon a small park tucked between two buildings. It was quieter here, with children playing and an elderly man feeding pigeons. In the corner, she spotted a worn bench that had seen better days. She sat down, her back straight, and let herself relax for a few moments. Her mind was already buzzing with new ideas for melodies, fragments of songs she had played in the past mixing with thoughts of improvisation. She hummed softly, her lips barely moving, creating a small song that echoed in her own head, waiting for the chance to become real music again. Just then, a man walked into the park, carrying a small accordion. He noticed her sitting quietly and smiled. Without saying a word, he began playing a soft tune, simple but cheerful. She watched him, fascinated by the ease with which he handled the instrument. It reminded her that music could appear anywhere, in any form, and that even in a world filled with struggle, there was room for joy and creativity. The two of them exchanged glances, and without speaking, they found a rhythm together. Her hums and his accordion created an unplanned duet that drew the attention of a few park-goers. People started to pause and listen, their curiosity piqued by the unexpected music. A few clapped quietly, encouraging them to continue. She realized that even without a piano, she could still share her gift, finding melodies in the simplest of sounds. Her fingers tapped the air as if they were on invisible keys, translating her thoughts into music for those willing to listen. The elderly man nodded at her, and they played together for a while, the music weaving through the trees and reaching the small audience that had gathered. After the impromptu performance, she thanked the man with a warm smile. He nodded in return and walked away, leaving her with a renewed sense of confidence. She felt that her music had power beyond the piano, that it could touch hearts wherever she went. The park had become a stage, and she realized that she didn't need to wait for opportunity to find her. She could create it herself. Feeling a surge of determination, she decided to visit a nearby community center she had noticed earlier. The building was modest, but through the windows she could see a small music room. She approached cautiously, unsure if she would be allowed inside. To her relief, a kind-looking woman greeted her warmly at the door. When she explained that she played piano and loved music, the woman smiled and offered her a chance to use the practice room for a few hours each day. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and it gave her a place to develop her skills away from the street. She spent hours in the small room, her fingers moving across the keys with a growing confidence. The piano there was old but well-maintained, responding beautifully to her touch. She played pieces she had learned long ago and experimented with new melodies, letting her creativity flow freely. Each note she played strengthened her resolve and reminded her why she loved music so deeply. The quiet of the room allowed her to focus, and she could feel her abilities improving with every hour she spent there. As days turned into weeks, she became a regular at the community center. The woman at the door began to take notice, occasionally asking about her life and offering encouragement. Some of the other musicians who visited the center started to listen to her play, impressed by the skill and emotion she brought to every performance. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged somewhere, like her talent was being recognized and nurtured rather than overlooked. Her performances at the center slowly attracted attention from people outside. A local cafe owner heard about the young woman and invited her to play a small set for the customers. Though nervous at first, she accepted the offer. Sitting at the cafe piano, she played with the same passion she had displayed on the streets. The audience was captivated, and when she finished, they applauded warmly. For the first time, she realized that music could be more than survival. It could be a way to connect with people, to inspire and bring joy. Each day, she practiced, played, and learned. Her confidence grew, and she began to dream bigger. She imagined performing in larger spaces, sharing her music with more people, and maybe even creating opportunities for herself beyond the street corners and small community rooms. The memory of being laughed at for asking for a piece of food became a distant thought, replaced by the realization that her talent was valuable and that the world was starting to notice. Yet, despite the progress, she never forgot the streets where she had started. The hunger, the struggle, and the uncertainty were part of her story, shaping the way she played and the emotion behind each note. She knew that her music was not just skill, but a reflection of her experiences, her resilience, and her heart. And with every day that passed, she felt more prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, carrying her music with her as a light in the world. She had been practicing at the community center for weeks, and each day brought new discoveries. Her fingers were faster, her memory sharper, and the music she created felt more alive than ever before. But she could sense that something bigger was waiting for her, something beyond the small rooms and quiet corners where she had begun. One afternoon, as she played a familiar melody with gentle variations, a man entered the room. He was older, dressed in a neat suit, carrying a small notebook and a pair of spectacles. There was a quiet presence about him, and the way he listened made her stop mid-note. He approached slowly, nodding politely. She stood up, unsure whether she should greet him formally or remain quiet. He smiled gently and said, "Your playing is remarkable. May I speak with you for a moment?" Hesitation and curiosity mixed in her mind, but she nodded. The man introduced himself as someone who taught music professionally and had a keen eye for discovering talent. He had heard about her from people at the community center and had come to see if it was true. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. She had never imagined that someone like him would be interested in her music, and a strange mix of fear and excitement surged through her. He asked her to play again, and this time, she poured everything she had into the music, the struggles, the long nights, the hunger, and the hope. Every note spoke of her journey, of the resilience that had kept her going even when life seemed unfair. The man listened without interrupting, his eyes sometimes closing as he felt the depth of the music. When she finished, he clapped softly, almost in disbelief, and said, "You have a rare gift. Have you ever had formal training?" She shook her head, feeling a mixture of pride and embarrassment. He didn't seem judgmental, only genuinely curious. He explained that there were opportunities for her to develop her talent further, to perform in larger spaces, and even to teach music to others if she wished. The idea seemed both exciting and impossible at the same time. Over the next few days, he visited regularly, offering guidance and exercises to improve her technique. His presence was encouraging, but it also challenged her. She worked harder than ever, practicing scales, arpeggios, and new pieces. Sometimes she grew frustrated, feeling that she couldn't meet his expectations, but he always reminded her gently, "You have the heart for music. Your skill will follow. Trust yourself." His encouragement became a constant source of motivation, and she found herself looking forward to his visits with eagerness. Word about her talent began to spread outside the community center. One afternoon, a young woman who ran a small local magazine stopped by while she was practicing. She had heard about the pianist on the street who had amazed passersby and wanted to write a story. The young woman asked if she could record a short performance and take some photos. Though initially shy, the pianist agreed. She played her heart out, feeling that this might be her first step into a larger world. The article was published a week later, and suddenly, more people wanted to hear her play. Invitations came from small cafes, local gatherings, and charity events. She began to realize that the music she had once played only to survive was now opening doors she had never imagined. Each performance, no matter how small, became a learning experience. She observed how different audiences reacted, how the music could bring smiles, tears, or thoughtful silence. It was no longer about just playing notes. It was about connecting with people in a way words could never achieve. One evening, after a performance at a small cafe, a man approached her with a camera. He introduced himself as a videographer who created short films about people with extraordinary talents. He asked if he could document her story, from the streets to her current progress, to inspire others who might be struggling. She hesitated at first, feeling shy about sharing so much of her personal life, but eventually agreed. She realized that her journey could help others, showing them that talent and determination could overcome even the harshest challenges. Filming began the next day, capturing her practicing at the community center, performing at local venues, and even walking through the streets where she had started. The crew was careful, respectful, and patient, allowing her to be herself without pressure. She felt both nervous and proud as she recounted her experiences. For the first time, she saw her life from another perspective, not just as a series of struggles, but as a story of perseverance, creativity, and quiet triumph. As her reputation grew, she caught the attention of a local music competition. It was a small event, nothing compared to the grand stages she had dreamed of, but it offered a chance to perform in front of judges and a larger audience. The thought of competing was intimidating, and doubt crept into her mind. She remembered the street corners where people had laughed at her humble request for food, and wondered if she could face a crowd without the safety of anonymity. Despite the fear, she decided to participate. The man who had discovered her offered guidance, helping her select pieces that showcased her abilities while also telling her story through music. She practiced relentlessly, refining every note, every pause, and every emotional nuance. The hours of effort began to show, and she grew more confident with each rehearsal. By the day of the competition, she felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement, her heart beating fast as she stepped onto the small stage. The audience was larger than anything she had experienced before. Some faces were unfamiliar, some were curious, and some looked skeptical. She took a deep breath, reminded herself why she loved music, and let her fingers find the keys. The first notes were cautious but soon flowed freely, expressing everything she had felt and learned in her journey so far. The room seemed to quiet, the chatter fading as people listened intently, drawn into the story she was telling with each melody. As she played, she noticed subtle reactions, people leaning forward, eyes glistening, some nodding in time with the music. It was no longer just about skill, it was about connection, about reaching hearts and minds in ways words could not. She felt a sense of freedom, as if the music itself was lifting her above the fear and doubt that had once weighed her down. Every note carried a piece of her soul, a reminder of the struggles she had endured and the resilience that had brought her here. When the final note faded, there was a brief moment of silence, followed by applause that seemed to grow louder with each passing second. She stood, breathless and overwhelmed, feeling a mixture of pride, relief, and joy. The judges nodded with approval, and some even rose to offer their congratulations. In that moment, She realized that her music had spoken for her in a way she had never imagined possible. She had transformed from the hungry street musician into a performer who could inspire and move others through her art. After the competition, she walked through the streets she had once wandered, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The city felt different now, not just a place of struggle and survival, but a canvas for her talent and determination. She understood that the road ahead would still have challenges, but she also knew that she had discovered a strength within herself that no hardship could take away. Her music had become more than a means to survive. It was her voice, her story, and her way to connect with the world. With each passing day, she felt ready to take the next step, knowing that the possibilities were endless if she remained true to herself and her passion. After the competition, her life began to change in ways she had never imagined. The recognition she received gave her confidence, but it also brought new responsibilities and expectations. Invitations to play at local events and small concert halls started arriving, each one a chance to share her music with a wider audience. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, remembering the days when she had played for a piece of food and had been laughed at. The thought of performing in front of strangers still made her stomach flutter, but she knew she could no longer let fear hold her back. She dedicated herself to practice with a new intensity. Every day, she arrived at the community center early, spending hours at the piano, refining pieces and experimenting with new melodies. The man who had first discovered her continued to guide her, offering advice on technique and interpretation. He encouraged her to explore the emotional depth of her music, to make each performance a reflection of her own journey. She listened carefully, soaking up every suggestion, grateful for his patience and belief in her abilities. Her first real paid performance was at a small recital organized by a local arts group. She arrived early, her heart pounding as she looked at the stage and the neatly arranged seats. The audience slowly filled the room, and she could see a mix of faces, some familiar from the community center, others strangers curious to hear the pianist who had captured attention in the city. She took a deep breath, reminding herself why she played music in the first place. It wasn't about recognition or money. It was about expressing herself and connecting with others. As she played, the nervousness melted away. Her fingers moved across the keys with ease, the music flowing naturally as she immersed herself in the story each piece told. She noticed the audience leaning forward, captivated by the melodies and the emotions behind them. Some closed their eyes, others whispered softly to their companions, but all seemed affected by the music. When she finished, the applause was warm and genuine, and she felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had known before. Word of her performance spread, and more opportunities followed. She was invited to play at charity events, local festivals, and even small television segments. Each experience taught her something new about performing, about how to engage with an audience, and about the power of music to bring people together. She felt herself growing not just as a musician, but as a person, learning to trust her instincts, to handle pressure, and to embrace her unique voice. One day, while practicing at the community center, she received a call from a renowned pianist who had heard about her performances. The invitation was to perform in a prestigious concert hall, a place she had only dreamed of. The thought of playing in such a grand venue was both thrilling and terrifying. She knew this could be a turning point in her life, an opportunity to step into the world she had always longed for. She accepted, though doubt lingered in the back of her mind. Could she rise to the occasion? In the weeks leading up to the concert, she poured herself into preparation. Her days were filled with practice, study, and rehearsals. She worked tirelessly, focusing not just on the technical aspects of her playing, but also on the emotional connection she wanted to create with the audience. She experimented with dynamics, tempo, and phrasing, trying to convey her story through every note. It was exhausting work, but each day she felt stronger, more confident, and more ready to face the stage. The night of the concert arrived. She stood backstage, listening to the murmurs of the audience and the rustling of programs. The lights, the grandeur of the hall, and the anticipation of the crowd were overwhelming. Her heart raced, and she felt a familiar mix of excitement and fear. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, and remembered the streets where she had begun, the times she had played for scraps of food, and the moments of quiet triumph she had experienced along the way. Those memories gave her strength. When her name was announced, she walked onto the stage, feeling the weight of expectation, but also the thrill of opportunity. The grand piano before her seemed to invite her, and she sat down, fingers poised above the keys. The audience waited in silence, and she began to play. The first notes filled the hall, clear and resonant, carrying the emotion of her journey. She lost herself in the music, letting it flow naturally, allowing every challenge, every triumph, and every dream to be expressed through her performance. As she played, she noticed the audience's reactions, faces turned toward her, eyes wide with attention, some smiling, others with tears glistening. She felt a connection with them, a shared understanding that went beyond words. Her music spoke of struggle and perseverance, of hope and resilience, and it reached the hearts of everyone listening. The grandeur of the hall, the beauty of the instrument, and the attentive audience all combined to create an unforgettable experience. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, followed by a wave of applause that seemed to fill every corner of the hall. She stood, taking a small bow, feeling a rush of joy, relief, and pride. This was more than a performance. It was a validation of her journey, a recognition of the talent and determination that had carried her from the streets to the stage. She realized that every hardship she had endured had shaped her music and her character, making this moment all the more meaningful. After the concert, she was approached by several people who wanted to work with her, including music teachers, event organizers, and even young musicians seeking guidance. She felt both humbled and inspired by the interest in her abilities. The city she had once navigated with uncertainty now seemed full of possibilities, and she embraced each opportunity with gratitude and determination. She continued to practice, perform, and learn, knowing that this was only the beginning of her journey. Her story began to inspire others as well. People who had heard about her journey from the streets to the concert hall shared it widely, and she received letters and messages from aspiring musicians who saw her as a symbol of hope. She realized that her music had the power not only to express her own experiences, but also to encourage and uplift others. This sense of purpose became a driving force, motivating her to continue honing her craft and to share her story wherever she could. Despite the growing fame and recognition, she remained humble and grounded. She never forgot the streets where she had begun, the hunger she had felt, or the small acts of kindness from strangers that had helped her along the way. These memories shaped the way she approached her music, reminding her that talent alone was not enough. It was persistence, heart, and connection that truly mattered. Each performance was not just a display of skill, but a tribute to her journey and to those who had believed in her when no one else did. The young woman now understood that her path had been shaped by a combination of struggle, opportunity, and determination. She had transformed from a street musician asking for food into a pianist performing on stages she had once only dreamed of. But she also knew that the journey was ongoing, that there were always new heights to reach, new audiences to touch, and new experiences to embrace. With each note she played, she felt a deeper sense of purpose and a stronger connection to the world around her, ready to face whatever came next with courage and grace. The journey from the quiet streets to the grand concert halls had changed her in ways she had never imagined. She had grown in confidence, skill, and understanding of herself, but she remained grounded, aware of the struggles that had shaped her and the people who had supported her along the way. Even as opportunities continued to appear, she carried the memory of the early days when a single request for a piece of food had sparked a chain of events that would transform her life. Her schedule had become full with performances, rehearsals, and occasional media appearances. She now had a small team that helped organize her events, manage invitations, and ensure she could focus on her music. Yet, despite the growing demands, she never lost the love for simply sitting at a piano and playing. She remembered the quiet mornings at the community center, the improvisations in the park, and the first audience who had stopped to listen to her on the streets. Those memories reminded her why she had started and what her music truly meant. One afternoon, she received an invitation to perform at a prestigious charity gala. The event was known for attracting influential people in the world of music, art, and philanthropy. She knew that this performance could open doors to even bigger opportunities, but it also came with high expectations. The thought of performing in front of such a distinguished audience was intimidating, and she felt the familiar flutter of nervousness in her chest. She reminded herself that the journey had taught her to trust her abilities, and she focused on preparing a program that would convey both technical skill and heartfelt emotion. The night of the gala arrived, and she stepped onto the stage, greeted by an audience dressed in elegant attire. The lights were bright, the room filled with anticipation, and the grand piano seemed to shine under the spotlight. She took a deep breath, letting the familiar rhythm of her heartbeat guide her. As her fingers touched the keys, she felt the music flow naturally, carrying her experiences, dreams, and emotions into every note. Each piece told a story, not just of music, but of perseverance, hope, and the journey from struggle to triumph. The audience responded with rapt attention. Faces softened, eyes glistened with emotion, and hands hovered over applause. She realized that her music had the power to connect people in a deep and personal way, transcending words and language. For her, this connection was the true reward of performing. She no longer played just to impress or gain recognition. She played to share a piece of herself, to communicate the universal language of human emotion through melody and harmony. After the performance, she was approached by several influential musicians and music educators, who were impressed by her skill and the depth of her expression. They encouraged her to continue exploring opportunities to perform internationally, and to consider recording her own album. The thought of taking her music to a global audience both thrilled and humbled her. She knew that her journey had been extraordinary, but she also understood that she had much to learn and experience. Each new challenge was a chance to grow and to inspire others with her story. In the following months, she began to travel for performances, visiting cities and countries she had never imagined she would see. Each concert was a new experience, filled with different audiences, cultures, and atmospheres. She discovered that music had a unique power to bridge divides, to bring people together regardless of language or background. She witnessed tears of joy, smiles of wonder, and moments of quiet reflection from people who had never known her struggles, but connected with her music on a profound level. Despite the growing fame, she remained humble and grounded. She continued to visit the community center whenever she could, mentoring young musicians and sharing her experiences. She remembered the small acts of kindness that had helped her along the way, the encouragement of strangers, the generosity of people who offered food, and the patient guidance of those who recognized her talent early. She understood that her journey was not just about personal success, but also about giving back and helping others find their own paths. One day, she returned to the streets where she had first asked for a piece of food. The piano corner had changed little, still worn and familiar. She sat down and began to play, not for recognition or money, but for the joy of sharing music with anyone willing to listen. Passers-by paused, some recognizing her from the stories they had heard, others simply captivated by the beauty of the sound. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of connection and gratitude. The journey had come full circle, from humble beginnings to extraordinary achievements. Yet the heart of her music remained the same. Her performances now carried an added depth, born from the understanding that talent alone was not enough. It was the persistence, resilience, and humanity behind the music that made it resonate with others. Each note she played reflected her life experiences, the hardships she had faced, the hope she had nurtured, and the joy she had found in every step of her journey. The music was a living testament to the power of determination and the beauty of the human spirit. As she continued to perform, travel, and mentor, she realized that her story had become more than her own. It had become a source of inspiration for countless others who faced their own struggles and doubts. Letters and messages arrived from aspiring musicians and ordinary people alike, sharing how her journey had motivated them to pursue their dreams and believe in their own abilities. She understood that her music had the power to transform lives, just as it had transformed hers. She looked ahead with hope and determination. The world was full of possibilities, and she was ready to embrace them with the same passion, courage, and humility that had carried her from the streets to the stage. She knew that challenges would continue to arise, but she also knew that the lessons she had learned, the importance of perseverance, the value of kindness, and the strength of human connection would guide her through whatever lay ahead. In every performance, she sought to capture the essence of her journey, sharing not just music but a message of hope and resilience. She wanted her audiences to feel that even in the face of hardship, it was possible to rise, to pursue one's dreams, and to touch the hearts of others through dedication and passion. The young woman who had once asked for a piece of food had become a symbol of inspiration, a living proof that talent, combined with determination and humanity, could create extraordinary outcomes. Her story continued to unfold, each day bringing new experiences, new audiences, and new opportunities to share her music and her message. And through it all, she remained true to the essence of who she was, a musician who had started with humble beginnings, who had faced doubt and struggle, and who had used her gift to connect, inspire, and transform lives. The piano, once a source of survival, had become a vessel for expression, a bridge to the world, and a reminder that no matter how small the beginning, greatness could emerge from perseverance, courage, and the love of one's craft.